welcome to The Explainer. So, what on earth does plumbing have to do with politics? Well, it turns out more than you might think. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful idea called the scaling error. And it's a concept that uses something as simple as a water pipe to explain a huge, fundamental challenge in American governance.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, let's start with a little thought experiment. Just forget politics for a second and think about plumbing.
Right. Imagine there's a single utility sitting in Washington, D.C., and it's their job to manage the water pressure for a shower in Los Angeles, a factory over in Chicago, and a skyscraper in New York City, all at the same time from one control room. Basically one giant set of pipes for an entire continent.
Now, most of us would hear that and just laugh, right? And not because water isn't important. No, it's because water is so important that trying to manage it like that sounds like a complete fantasy. It's just absurd on its face. And here's exactly why. A continent isn't just a really big town. The engineering problems are in a totally different league. You've got unique local needs. Los Angeles is not New York City. You have completely different geographies, and there's the massive risk of one single failure causing a system-wide collapse.
And this is where it gets really interesting. If this idea is so obviously a bad one for plumbing, why does that common sense instinct just seem to vanish when we start talking about national policy? This whole water metaphor is a great way to start analyzing proposals like those from Senator Elizabeth Warren, which brings us to the core idea.
You see, proposals like these, and they're big ones for massive improvements in housing, healthcare, Social Security, they all seem to share this sort of hidden assumption about how a government is supposed to work when you're dealing with a massive scale. And that brings us right to the main event, this concept called the scaling error. And it's really a simple idea. It's the mistake of thinking that something that works in one context can just be copy-pasted into a completely different one without failing spectacularly.
So many popular policy ideas seem to assume that the answer to this is, well, yeah, pretty much. They essentially treat the United States as if it were just a really, really big version of a country like, say, Sweden.
Just look at the sheer difference in magnitude here. And listen, this isn't a moral point about which country is better. It's a design point. It's about being honest about what kind of system you're actually working with. And this chart just puts that massive gap into perspective. A nation of 340 million people isn't just Sweden with a few more lanes on the highway. It's a fundamentally different kind of animal that needs a totally different architecture. So the crucial takeaway here is this. When you scale a system up this much, complexity stops being some minor inconvenience you can just ignore. It becomes the governing reality. It's the main thing you have to design for. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, let's look at a principle that actually builds directly on our water metaphor. It's an idea called subsidiarity. Okay, this isn't some political slogan. It's really a practical engineering principle. The idea is super simple. Problems should be solved by the people who are closest to them. Think of it like the political version of creating separate pressure zones and shutoff valves in that giant water system, so one leak doesn't end up draining the whole country. So let's take housing. Instead of one big federal plan, this principle would mean giving the power to the local level, because that's where the real bottlenecks are, right? The local zoning boards, the permit offices. You put the power and the accountability right where the problem actually lives. And you can make a similar argument for healthcare. The problem is this tangled web of doctor supply, state regulations, licensing rules, the whole thing. So the idea here is to stop trying to find one single national template that fits all, and instead let different states innovate and experiment to see what actually works best for them. And this all leads to the ultimate takeaway here. The argument isn't about having smaller, less ambitious goals. Not at all. It's about having a smarter design, a totally different architecture for getting those big things done. And this table lays out the two opposing models perfectly. On the one side, you have that single national blueprint where all the power is concentrated in Washington. And on the other, you have lots of local experiments with the power and the accountability kept as close to the problem as possible. But the argument goes even deeper. It says that centralization at this massive scale doesn't just mismanage things. It actually dehumanizes them. It turns your neighbors into numbers on a spreadsheet and real living problems into national abstractions that are managed from thousands of miles away. And really, the final point is about trust.
Trust isn't earned by promising to pull more levers from farther and farther away. No, it's earned when systems are effective and accountable right where people live, when the permits get approved on time, when hospitals have to compete on results, and when you actually know who to call or who to blame when things go wrong.
So this leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question to chew on. What if the most important debate we should be having isn't about what we want the government to do, but about how our government is actually built to do anything in the first place?